Hey now, it's Dan Aberhart here, and welcome to the Growing the Future podcast, where we talk to folks who like to innovate and collaborate and transform the agricultural industry. Thank you so much for joining us for Season 5, Episode 4. This conversation you're going to very much enjoy. This was an individual that I ended up talking to just through serendipity. He called me up and he was interested in our product, but as I got talking to him, I realized, wow, this guy is radio gold and has a lot of wisdom and stories to share and has a unique perspective as a Saskatchewan farmer. We talked to a lot of different folks on the podcast, but it's not that often that we talk to a producer on the ground, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I think you're going to get a lot out of this kitchen table style chat with a Saskatchewan farm boy with some very interesting tales. But before I get to our esteemed guest, I'd like to remind you to check out the Aberhart family of companies online. You can start with aberhartfarms.com, where we grow food to feed the world in Langeberg, Saskatchewan, not that far as the crow flies or stone's throw from our guest today as it would be, and suregrowth.ca, where if you need some precision agronomy consulting services, you can hook up with them there. Convergencegrowth.com, probably the newest member of the family, where we accelerate solutions across food, health, and agriculture. And AberhartAgSolutions.ca, where we deliver one-of-a-kind fertility solutions to the world, to the farm, to your farm. And get notified about our new episodes by signing up for our newsletter, Growing the Future Podcast.ca. So without a further ado, my next guest was born and raised on the family farm with 9 siblings. That's similar to my father, who had, I think he had 8 siblings. We joked there was 11 years of summer fallow and then 9 years of great crops, because they all came in a row. So they must have figured something out there. He took out the family farm, and in 1979, he became a member of the Saskatchewan Wheat Pool Canadian Wheat Board. I think it's 1979 you became a member of the Canadian Wheat Board. We'll talk about that. And this individual successfully runs a strict zero negative talk or axe grinding operation today. I think that's a badge of honor. I like the positivity. He believes that everything should be fun off the farm as well, and it's important for the soul, and that's why he's invested in a fly-in fishing camp. So whether you love farming or fishing, it's going to be a little bit for everybody today. He's a real, true, raw Saskatchewan farm boy. Today we're going to talk about what it was like growing up on the farm with 9 siblings, what his career in agriculture has looked like over the years, how he got invested into a flying fishing camp. It's a really interesting story. Welcome to the show, Micheal Muscoby.
Thank you, Dan.
Really excited to have you here. And when we got talking there initially, one of the things that really fascinated me, and I'm sure we can all relate to it, is, you know, everybody on the prairies came from somewhere recently, relatively recently. We have a background in the old country. We have maybe roots of folks that came and broke the land and got started in this country. Can we start at the 30,000 foot view, Micheal, and tell us what you know of your ancestors and your father and your grandfather and anything back beyond, as far as you could go, where you guys came from, the old country, and how you got started farming in Saskatchewan?
My family immigrated from Krakow, Poland, my grandfather, and my grandmother from the Ukraine, and on my mother's side, English, London and England. Although you can trace my name back, we're actually probably more of a Russian heritage, given the Eastern European and how borders change and all this and that. So, but the lion's share of the farming side was my family namesake, or the Muscoby, and a Kashmir, that's Ukrainian. I am a card-carrying member of the Ukrainian Co-op in Regina. You have to have Ukrainian heritage in order to have a membership, and they searched me and found it, and oh, well, there you go, got a little Ukrainian. So a little hodgepodge that way. In the start of the 19th century, 1898, my grandfather immigrated here as a boy. My grandmother was born in Well, today Saskatchewan, but in 1903 it was the Northwest Territories. Her parents had immigrated to the prairie and were building a home for the winter. So when you immigrated, you wanted to make it to Canada in the springtime so you could grow food and this. So you would leave Europe in the middle of the winter or even the fall to make it to England, to make it on a boat, to make it to Canada, and to get off the train in Broadview, Saskatchewan, where they managed to buy what everybody says was a good team of horses. So they would compare it to a good four-wheel drive today. So in farming, this is important, the horsepower, same as today. But in 1903, while the parents were building the house, my grandmother was born under a wagon box about a mile west of Kipling because that's where they were living while they were building their house. So it's always been a little family story. And 2 days later, my great grandmother, great grandfather, and that's my grandmother who had just bore a child, were out fighting a prairie fire in late October. Now you have to remember there's no trees around at that time. You got a few willows in this, so quite a deal how the pioneers and the pioneering women, maybe more so, pulled up their socks and did what had to be done. Yeah, and then in the early 1930s, my grandfather tried farming. He failed in his first attempt. He rented land. The 30s were tough. So, in order to gather up some money, he headed for Detroit, Michigan, where he managed to land a job working with Ford Motor Company. Now, he came back from Detroit with the stories that when he was in the lineup to apply for a job at Ford, the first sign in the lineup said, Ford never fires a man. Now, in the 1930s, Ford was generating their own electricity. They were not on the grid. So if you didn't work out at any other job at Ford, you could always shovel coal to the electric generator to generate electricity. So Ford never fired a man. But another sign he related, the next sign said 900 men needed tomorrow in it. So they needed workers no matter what in it. Went down there, made some money, took my father and other kids and them down there, came back, and then in 1938, 37, they bought the land that our house and our farm is still on. And in 1939, my grandfather bought a International Farm All H tractor, $975. Now, that doesn't sound like much today, but it was probably as expensive as tractors are today. In
Just add 3 zeros.
Just keep going in it. But that tractor's still on the farm. My dad and I rejuvenated it and painted it up and made it into a parade tractor. So we still have the original tractor on the farm. Fuel would come out in a 45-gallon drum, those sort of. And then when my mom and dad got married in the early 50s and took over the farm, there was just my grandmother left. My grandfather had died at the age of 21. So my dad was in the position. No, he died when my dad was 21 years old. So dad was in the position of farming. He just instantly became a farmer because you got to milk cows and you got this to do. So you did for the family. So through the years and 9 kids, baby boomers we are. I am towards the end of the baby boom, but most of the siblings are retired now and a little older. Uh, Farmed through those years, lots of kids around. Dad said it was the best years he ever had with kids all over and everything, lots of fun. Although he did say that sometimes, like when the kids were young, he'd shake his head and go 2 years no sleep. He'd say, and the kids in diapers and this, but it's still the best years you'll ever have in his mind of it. So then I graduated high school 1981. Uh, I shouldn't tell you or should, but it was the in 1981, farmland was at the highest price it has ever been. And if you take $80,000 for a quarter of land in 1981, in our district, that translates into dollars today that we have just achieved the same point recently as where land prices were in 1981. If you go from peak to peak and equal your dollars, you adjust for inflation, that at this is where we are today. The problem in 1981 was that the prime lending rate was 19%. So it was almost suicide to try and buy land at those kind of interest. So I just worked for my dad, bought my first land in 1986, and I don't know, bought land, periodically through the career. The land price that peaked in 81 made its bottom in the year 2000 in our district, where some land around here, and it's decent farmland, actually traded for like 15, 18, 20,000 a quarter. So the first 20 years of my farming was a steadily declining value of farmland. Then, as the 2000s came, well, you can't get much lower, so you might as well stick with it. And now I have 20 years of continually rising land prices and some favorable interest rates and this and that. But my first job on the farm involved a milk pail and a cow, so you know where we were when you were younger. And to see where we are today is quite astronomical, to have seen the changes that we've done on the farm. We sold out of cattle 1981. We were still pitching square bales and pitchforks and this. So we sold out of cattle in the wrong time, because then somebody invented a round baler. And that just changed the game to have a round baler. I mean, and today I see them hauling many bales on a hay rack. Wait a minute. Yeah. And they'll have 2 round bales clamped on the front of the front end loader. And I think how easily they move feet around. Our modern ag, we have neighbors that grow corn, and then they just walk the cows out to the corn. Quite remarkable, the ideas that guys have come up with. And I don't know, moving more towards today, we have just nicely finished our family farm succession when it comes to transferring and that from my dad. I have a daughter and a son-in-law that are working with me and live out on the farm. And it seems like it's just one transition after another, that now I want to, and we want to move forward in transitioning to the next generation. So, and I just got a little
Good for
grandson.
You. Good for you.
Yeah, a year and a half ago. So that's been fun, and who knows where it'll go. He might be a farmer.
I seen a photo of you with him. You look great.
Yeah. He was 8 months old and had a flat wrench in his hand. So how about that? There you go.
Well,
Yeah.
how is it, Michael, that you were of eight siblings, you were the one that took over the farm, and how looking at your succession plan now and looking back with your dad, how did that all go, taking over the farm?
Well, like I say, when in the years of it, there's probably nobody that's going to put a place for this many children and still run a viable farm and try to, work it. So it seemed rather that, well, everybody go and try and find some work. I almost thought that I was the unlucky one because I stayed back on the farm. There was better money to be made off farm than there was on farm. When we sold the cattle in 1981, I would go to Edmonton in the wintertime to try and make some money and then come back in the spring and farm. So I guess if it was really done, I was the only one that was so interested that there was no way you were going to get rid of me off that farm. I like a bad cold. You just can't get rid of me. A sheer determination, Dan, I guess, and a good working relationship with my father. 37 years we partnered and a very good working relationship. Respect as well. And yeah, most of the siblings in those days and that, they'd head for the city, get a reasonably good paying job, buy a nice enough house and car, yeah, when you're in hard times, yeah, I guess it was just sheer determination that keeps me
Well, baby
going or
boomers
got
have had the
me.
opportunity. Baby boomers have had the opportunity to live in one of the greatest times in history, and I guess you could argue that things are still getting better. But it must have been a very, like you say, extremely different scenario from when you were taking over the farm to how your children are viewing it. Because really now, let's face it, there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of wealth in agriculture right now. Where in 1981, I don't know if, or sorry, 2000. Of course, 1981 was the high, and 2000 was the low. In 2000, there was land in Saskatchewan, viable land that was just going fallow because nobody was farming it. I remember that I started selling sprayers in Moosomin, and some of
Right,
the
you would
land wasn't
know
even
that.
worth farming. Yeah, yeah,
The Royal Bank of Canada said, we're not in the business of owning farmland, but they were repossessing
yeah,
farmland.
yeah.
And they didn't really want it. I bought some land in 1994. I bought a half section from the Royal Bank of Canada. And of course, the previous operator had right of first refusal. So he's a good neighbor of mine, and I like the guy. So I said, Dave, if you want to farm it and bid it, I'm not even going to bid on it because, I kind of like you and you've been farming it. And he says, there's no way. I'm like that, just totally, totally disgruntled and
Yeah.
worn out and stressed of it that he couldn't see or didn't have it in his heart anymore to try and keep going. That's only with the support of family and my mom and dad uh, in the energies that say, keep going. Farmland's always worth it. Farming's always worth it. Keep going. Try to enjoy what you do even though you can't really see a path to great wealth, you hope for better things in the future. Keep growing, keep going. So most many years, I'd go and try and make some money off the farm. In 1999, in 1999, we got quite a bit of rain in this district, didn't seed much of a crop. There wasn't much government assistance. Crop insurance is crop insurance, and it only works if you get it seeded. If you didn't get it seeded, you didn't have any insurance on it. So I worked all year long on the farm to lose $650. And by the time I was done, I had went out pig trucking and whatnot, and I had made about 15,000 through the winter. But it really made you wonder. Land prices are low and people are selling out and it costs, but you know, like I say, you kind of think you can't get any worse from here, and dirt will always be here, and people need to eat.
Well,
So
looking
we
back,
kept
did you
plugging
feel,
along.
Michael, that you wanted to? Do you wish now that you had been more aggressive and you'd purchased more land, or that you had done things differently, seeing the opportunity now?
Yes, even at the time, Dan. But your like Royal Bank also sent out, you know, I'm not picking on them, they have all the banks are the same. They said, we really don't want to be agricultural lenders. The risks are too high.
Wow.
So your farm credit corporations and those, it was a matter of risk and lending. The lending and the financial capacities were constrained at that time. We have much better access today than we ever did in those days. I use like cash advance on grain. Well, if you don't have any grain, you don't have any cash advance available to you. So, financially as well, it was tough. They just wouldn't loan. End of story.
So you have seen the rise and fall and the rise of value of farmland. You've seen the Canadian Wheat Board come and go. You farm with your parents. Now you're looking at putting it on, working with the next generation. What were some of the really big sea changes in farming over time that you experienced that had an impact on you? What were some of the bigger events throughout your farming career that are very notable that come to mind?
Wow. Gee, that is a good one, isn't it? Uh, very notable in, hmm, geez, we got tractors with cabs and air conditioning now. It's kind of comfortable. Heck of a lot better than it
An auto
used to be.
steer?
Yeah,
Auto
auto
steer and beer
steer,
fridges?
and just some of the advancements made it, more appealing to a person. Also, my neighbors and those that farm around me. If they can make a dollar, I can make a dollar. But when times were tough, if they can't make a dollar, how do I expect to make a dollar? That's respect for your neighbor, you know, that when somebody else can make a dollar and the economics are there and the impacts are there, I can make a dollar. Also, the advent of direct seeding and summer follow, which we started, say, early 90s or mid 90s or so, you could just see the opportunity for improvement agronomically. In the 80s, and dust and drift and half summer follow, and that wasn't fun. That wasn't fun to watch. That wasn't fun to be a part of, watching your soil drift away. And you could just cry to see it. And even today, when we're pushing bush or cleaning up and we find ridges of blow dirt in the edges of sloughs and all that, I can hardly remember when that dirt blew in there, but it did, and I do remember it. So the higher, putting more into the job and hopefully getting more out of it has been key. Anything you put more into it, you're going to get more out of it, and that is quite an idea, quite a thought that agriculture today is just flooded with. But it wasn't always.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't
Mm-hmm.
always.
Are you wondering if you shouldn't have had more livestock on the farm? Or are you really glad that at some point all the livestock went down the lane and you're just grain farming, Michael?
Right. Yes. Tough decision, Dan. If grain farming isn't that good, the advice given is to diversify, to diversify, to
Right.
diversify.
Right.
And if you end up too diverse, you can lose focus. So when I was younger and my mom and dad didn't have kids at home anymore and they're getting, the single elderly life, Dad says, well, I'm not interested in cattle. Are you? And I said, Dad, there's tons of people on the Regina Plains and other areas. They just grain farm, they just dirt farm. And they never have really had much livestock, and they seem to be able to make a living. So, would we be better to focus directly on crop production rather than in, say, a livestock industry as well as grain, as well as hogs, as well? Uh, you know, yeah,
Mm.
it was our decision back then to get rid of the cows. I'm just not a cowboy. It's just not in my heart to. I know. Oh man, I know guys. They love their cows,
Yeah.
and they do an excellent job of it, and they're really good at it. So it was a part to focus rather than diversify, and just determination to make it work.
Can you imagine working off the farm now? It seems like that was in your time, in my father's time, who's 72. My dad always worked off the farm until my brother convinced him to come home when the farm got to a certain size. And now it's hard to imagine with the size of the farm, well, you would get up and pack your lunch kit and go to work at the mine so you could afford to farm. But that's what my
Mhm.
dad did for 15 years and worked in crop insurance during the grip years. And he managed a John Deere dealership for 7 years. And the farm was always a side hustle. But now, I mean, the farming is a full-time job and you're busy all year round and you're busy in the winter doing something, Michael, aren't you?
Yes, yes, it is. And you've hit the nail right on the head. So my other siblings, in the wintertime or after they'd graduate, they'd go to Regina or so and get a job paying, 10, 12 bucks an hour, and there's pretty girls and bright lights. And then Dad would talk to them in March or April and say, well, are you thinking about coming back seeding time? And they'd say, I don't think so, Dad. And you can't blame them. And they've made a good living where they are in it, and lived in nice houses and done so. But when I was up in Edmonton, and I had a good job there, welding, we were working in those days, supplies and this to go in what they called the tar sands. But it was just an exploratory deal. There was no oil coming out of the tar sands back then. Today we call them the oil sands, and they have technology now, to extract that oil. They tell us that Canada is the third largest oil reserves in the world with 270 billion barrels of oil. Billion barrels of oil. But a big chunk is oil sand, oil that comes. But that was one way when you say, like, who ends up on the farm. Dad used to make a joke. He said it's almost child abuse to want your son to farm.
I know, right? It wasn't recommended. It was not
It, it, wa-
recommended to farm.
it was it
And
was not
now
a choice.
And now my little brother is a hell of a lot richer than I am, Michael. What went wrong here?
Yeah, it's an ebb and flow, the tides of, or if you will, the pendulum. The
Yeah,
big long
yeah,
swing of the pendulum, right?
yeah.
I said 20 years of deteriorating land prices, 20 years of rising prices, and where is our pendulum going to go next? But I love to see these young guys that are excited and that work and do and are technically advanced beyond and are just like sponges, ready to soak up what comes at them. I love to see that. It's a great spirit, and you have to maintain that spirit of curiosity, if that's how you say it.
Right. But 20, 40, 60, 80 years ago, there wasn't 8 billion people to feed with, rising lifestyles and a need for food and energy. And now they want us to farm carbon and hopefully we'll get to pay for it. You're an essential service in COVID. Congratulations. We need an essential worker. You could go wherever you want, do whatever you want.
Right. Yeah, we just kept going. But in the guys, I said they lock me in a cab with a bunch of windows, and I mean, COVID doesn't bother me. I don't, drive by, wave at the neighbor. Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Well, speaking about oil and all that, and so you were at the oil sands. I was thinking about the oil. I was talking about the oil sands the other day. I almost called them the tar sands, and I'm like, that's not right. It's the oil sands. But you were there before that stuff even started coming out of the ground, and you were there when they said we were going to run out of oil. You were there when they said we were going to run out of phosphorus. You were there at all these different junctures. Now they're saying, God bless them, the world's going to end, climate change, fire and wind and ocean will wipe out mankind from the face of the earth. How are you seeing where we're at? Have you seen it all come and gone? Do you feel like things are pretty positive? Or are you really worried about some of these bigger things? Like back in the day, you were worried about nuclear war with Russia. You were worried about oil running out. You're worried about, fertilizer running out when they had to switch to munitions in World War. Well, you weren't there in World War II. I'm being facetious, but are you worried about any of these things people are worried about? Or are they just typically people worrying because it's worrying has its own sort of payback? Let's face it.
Yes, it deserves our attention, our focus, as it did then. But in the early 80s, in the oil sands, my uncle was a lawyer for Imperial Oil based in Calgary. And when I started in the tar sand oil sands, he said that Imperial Oil has pretty much gotten out of the oil exploration business because they knew how much oil was out there. And they said, all we need is the technology and the smarts to be able to extract it properly. First, we start out just digging it and throwing it in trucks and all that. But today there's technology up there that is just mind-blowing how they're pulling that oil out and taking, and also in the recovery stage of putting it back the way it was, the environment and this and that. Everybody's working hard at this. They constantly will. Our challenges coming ahead, necessity is the mother of invention, and we will, I have complete confidence, we will overcome today's barriers. I already see coming down the pipeline things. They're experimental, they're brand new, they're still in, but they come to fruition only because we need them, because we want them, and because we have to have them. So our environment and climate is forcing us to adapt. But the adaptations that are coming, I can't wait till they get here. And I'm an older guy, and I don't want to miss out on the next 20, 30, 40 years. I do a little bit of off-farm investing. I have one of those direct investment, and it's more or less gambling. I'm just playing with it,
Yeah.
There's a company out there right now, and your anhydrous ammonia, NH3, will run an engine. And there's a boat floating or going to float that's going to run on NH3. We need fuel for heavy industry. So you take what we call anhydrous ammonia, you can burn that in an engine. Secondly, your anhydrous ammonia is not a greenhouse gas, although it is a pollutant. It is harmful. Everybody knows this, but it's not a greenhouse gas. The company that I kind of watch a little bit is building modular reactors with proprietary components that you hook up to electricity. So if you have green electricity, if you have green natural gas, you have green NH3, and any little imagination could tell you that we could be fertilizing with NH3, non-greenhouse gas. We could be running our tractor on NH3, nothing but water coming out the pipe. Tesla and the electrical world and all of these EVs and all that, I just can't wait for the changes. I now walk around the farm with a little impact that's got a battery on it, and that thing's strong enough it'll break bolts and whatever. Just the advancements that come along. Yes, there's a great place for caution. Yes, we have a lot of concerns today, but it will only drive innovation and progress. Really.
I love it.
That the chance for you and me and everyone to progress is the greatest thing. I was just hauling some wheat to the elevator today, Dan, and I took the Super B and I rolled those tarps. I remember the day when you crawled up on the truck, threw the tarp over, and had a bunch of rubber straps to try and hold that tarp on the truck. The progress that has been made. If somebody walked into our yard with a Super B that had rubber bands and a old hole in it tarp on the side, you'd go, what are you doing? That doesn't make sense. We just consider it commonplace.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah.
And it's a good thing to challenge ourselves. Yes, we have great challenges. Let's rise to them. We're capable.
Why do you think it is that amidst all of this progress, reading a book like Abundance, my brother and I are big fans of the concept. In the last 20 years, we've made huge strides in areas like war and pestilence and famine, despite what you'd hear on the news. And really, life on planet Earth is better with more opportunities than ever before. And, especially on the farm, has come a long ways, like you say. Why do you think it is that it's hard for us to see how good things there are, to be grateful for what we have, to understand we're making constant progress? Because you talk to young kids now, Micheal, okay? A lot of young kids, the world is ending and they can't sleep because of climate change. They don't even want to have any babies because it would be a sin to bring people into such a terrible world. It's an ethical morass to have children. But you're so positive. You see the progress. Why do you think it is people are held back by their mindset?
Is it the natural tragedy of human life or so that goes along? The negative sticks out much more. We have to take our time to smell the roses as we walk along the path. One thing, okay, you did ask about like a big change. At 14 years old, I had a bad accident out on the farm, and a bale elevator, the chain, you put a square bale on and it goes to the top. Well, when the bales got to the top, the back end of it went up in the air, and then it happened to catch me underneath, and it crushed me really bad, right in the face. So the handsome guy you see today was put together by a wonderful doctor in Regina named Dr. Holden. He made me, well, at least the girls will look at me. Once you go through a life-changing experience, I am happy every day. Happy to be here. Every farmer, like we say, is very positive. Even my daughter, I have a daughter in university, she talks like you say, that we feel we are always in a crisis. It's a continual crisis somewhere, and it does make headlines, and it is good fodder, but it's upon you to find the good things, to search for that, so that negative seems to be easy. Positive is the hard side to try and stay on. But geez, I've got hired guys out on the farm. They're great guys. And years ago, I think of my dad everybody was a single person farmer, except for like Hutterites, and some of them, they were the mega farms of yesterday, or even today was a Hutterite farm. They worked as a collective. But the Hutterites are very happy people. They enjoy every day and that. So when we went pig trucking and I'd stop at a Hutterite farm, I'd look at it and I'd go, they're happy because they're working together. And our farming today and the way it goes and the people that come, it's more fun and greater experience when you can bring a few people together and you see what can happen. Dad used to have a saying. He'd say that two men working together can do more than three men working by themselves.
Right.
If you're working together in a positive way,
Hmm.
you can really produce. So modern ag has that going for it. It's really good to me. My guys come out, my gals, my daughters, and we're in front of the shop and everything. And it is Finley, my grandson, comes out, and that it's just the greatest. Yes, I really, it's a sound, fundamental human function. We're social people.
What are you trying to teach them now that you were taught by your parents?
Trying to teach them the ability to adapt and change. We are, how you say, when evolution comes along, it is not the strongest or the fastest that actually evolve. It is those that can adapt and can adapt to change. And Mother Nature is very good at adapting to change. She has showed this all along. We too must always adapt to change. And it can come pretty quick. I said to you, high land prices, high interest rates. 3 years later, that land price is cut in half. And a neighbor of mine says to me, yeah, I bought some of that land and I paid for it twice over and I still lost it to the bank. That's hard, That
Yeah.
cuts you when you
Yeah.
see and hear these things. So you build on it and you adapt. And how you say farming sometimes is a lot of learning what to do, but it's also learning what not to do. And I think everybody can look back and say, I'm not going to do that again. You learn from your mistakes.
So speaking of
So,
learning, I wanted to ask you, Micheal, where do you get your information, and walk me through the planning and the seasons for you on the farm in terms of your strategy?
mostly from neighbors, friends, my business acquaintances. I have a couple of pretty good buddies that are farmers, but they don't actually farm. They are like a foreman, or I guess you'd say a hired man, but they are kind of working for absentee farmers.
Yeah.
My buddy Greg works on an organic farm, but the guy who owns the farm actually lives in Vancouver and just comes out for the season. My other buddy Nevin, he works at the Seedmaster farm, kind of Langbank. His boss, of course, is busy Seedmaster and all this. Nevin is the guy that has his boots on the ground. And when we get together and we start to visit, I can see where those guys have certain freedoms where they can simply be a genuine agrologist farmer because they're not all hung up on the price of fertilizer or the price of that tractor or the price of this. Their job is to produce. They are producers.
Yeah.
Their boss guy puts them in charge of production. So through visiting with them and them telling me things that did work and didn't work, yeah, it's all as much knowledge as I can get. I am a student of learning.
Yeah. Has it been a challenge in the last couple of years trying to navigate all the changes in prices and equipment's going up and fertilizer's going up and now it's going down, and or are you just
Yeah,
straight and narrow? Well, how do you do that?
no, it's been a challenge, all right. And when I visit with my dad, these numbers are out the roof. Like
Yeah.
he has problems grasping what I just spent on fertilizer. And you could say, if you have enough money to buy fertilizer, why do you want to buy fertilizer?
Yeah.
Well, that's the game we're in, and we keep going. If you have enough money to buy your canola seed, why do you want to buy canola seed? It has actually, though, created a bit of a disconnect between me and my siblings, because when they see the price of grain, they go, "Oh, you're making lots of money." And nobody sees the price of the bills, and nobody sees. And for me personally, when farmland prices go up, I actually don't have any more money in my bank account.
Yeah.
The only time I have is if I was to sell farmland. But if you want to be a farmer, you're going to need 5 very important aspects of your farm. You're going to need some dirt. You're going to need some people. You're going to need some equipment. You're going to need the infrastructure, shop, buildings somewhere, and you're going to need the inputs. So we kind of try, that can be, you focus lots on a farmland, but you don't have the equipment to operate it. Or you have a lot of good equipment, but I don't have anybody to drive it. I can't drive 3 tractors at one time. So it's a challenge. You bet. The numbers are scary a bit. It's kind of scary that the fertilizer I got in the bin right now, and I have no idea what I'm going to get for next year's crop. So sometimes I say to guys, Dan, the 2 best crops I've ever grown was 1986 and next year.
I love that optimism. How is
Yeah.
it that you know when to purchase your inputs? How do you make that decision? Is it a time of the year? Is it a certain price? Do you have advisors? How do you purchase your fertility?
Try to look at the world. Take a step back and look at the world around you. We hesitated in buying fertilizer last fall, but any article or this would tell you that fertilizer was in short supply. There was big demand from Europe because there's lots of problems over there. So the fertilizer guys say, well, we can either sell it to you at this price or we'll ship it over to Europe and they'll buy it.
Yeah.
What I held off because the thought came to my mind, over in Europe, the majority of their crops are planted as a winter crop. So they are seeding time. At the same time, we're trying to buy fertilizer over here. So I thought, we're doubling it up. Everybody's trying to buy fertilizer here, and they need fertilizer over in Europe. So if we're patient enough to wait to the end of the demand from Europe, we may see a little reprieve, plus the natural gas prices. You try and time it. But a year ago, we bought our fertilizer at the end of July, went before the price had risen because of the economics of rising natural gas and this and that we managed to get a hold of fertilizer. The only thing was, Dan, you got to take it. You got to pay for it.
Yeah.
And you got to take it. And it's August. And, it's a tough game and you don't win.
Well, and on the other side, how do you sell your grain? How do you manage that? How do you know when to sell?
Same. out of the gut, just out of our gut that goes. But watch the Americans. They're always, our prices come off the United States. Watch the Americans. No matter where it goes, they are the financial and agricultural powerhouse. We have South America and others, yes, but 52% of the wealth in the world is held by the United States. End of story. So they're the big boys on the block. You got to watch.
That's true.
They would say if you're sleeping by an elephant, you keep one eye open. Because if that elephant rolls over, he's going to crush you in it. So, yes, some of that. Also, there's good advice out there. When you see a profit, take it. You will never hit the top of the market. I've got to cover my expenses. A lot of them use a sprinkle it over the entire year and you will get an average price. 2 years ago, lots of farmers signed contracts. The drought hit.
Right.
They couldn't fulfill their contracts. This past spring was there were prices available that seemed really, really good. And the wheat I'm delivering today, I actually signed 12 months ago. But you couldn't beat the price. But there's tremendous risk there, Dan.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be able to back this up with some security somewhere. We don't grow a crop, as you know, and you can't fulfill a contract, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Not very many people in our business that we deal with actually are held to account by contracts. So there's high risk there. I'll use the example. Today we call it supply chain issues. But really what it is, in my mind, I say it is over-promising and under-delivering.
Yeah.
I promise you, I will get you that tractor. And then they go, hey, we can't get these four-wheel drives built because we can't get semiconductors or whatever. So they have the luxury of force majeure, or it was an act of God. The railroads can't get our grain to Vancouver because it rained too much. It's an act of God. We, like you and I and every farmer, cannot just pull out supply chain issues, force majeure. Last spring, everybody's talking about supply chain issues, and yet every one of my neighbors and ourselves managed to get that crop in. And they got it in as good a time as they could, and they found the people, and they found the microprocessors, and they drove to Yorkton to get their parts, and but they did what they had to get the job done.
Yeah.
There was nothing like I say, I cannot overpromise and underdeliver. I must underpromise and overdeliver. In other words, I need a little more wheat than what I signed on my contract, or it makes me nervous.
Yeah.
So that's some of the address of it, I think, Dan.
Yep. No, those are fair comments. And I think those contracts are a good tool. Unfortunately, a lot of people got on the wrong side of them, and then maybe you get gun shy at the wrong time, and it's tough to manage all that. Are you a John Deere man? Can you afford John Deere? Do you like John Deere? You have to drive the red or yellow.
I'm actually a little bit of the United Nations. Huh? I try to pick out what I feel every company has good models, and every company has some that don't work quite as good. So we started in the axial flow world back in 1978. Dad bought a rotary combine. That was a new concept that was unproven, but today it is the standard that it has become. But it was International Harvester that had that. So if you liked the rotor, you bought an International Harvester. Now I have 4 little John Deeres out at the farm, and people know 4230s, and 4440s, and those are great tractors. They're John Deere. So, okay, go pick up a John Deere. I got four-wheel drives. Well, I like the blue of New Holland, and Versatile was always a favorite, so we followed them along. We don't always have the local dealerships, but mechanics travel and salesmen travel, and yeah, we try to pick out good models, no matter which company, at a fair price.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we don't order in brand new. I'm picking up where I can.
We talk a lot on this show about precision ag and different technologies. And of course, everybody's using GPS nowadays with probably at least guidance, if not auto steer, and yield mapping and is quite common. But where are you at with precision agriculture and variable rate and different technologies? Has it made you money? Have you implemented it, or is it for the birds?
No, it's I wish I could do more. I wish I could afford to do more. And yes, variable rate has an excellent place. We're seeding Seed Hawk with sectional control. That's really good. You know, love that precision of it. Even in the spring and that. But we also have things like a broadcast spreader that I hooked that 4440 in the front of it. And we can variable rate over our land from high land to low land to sour land to heavy land to sandy land to clay land by using a fertilizer spreader before you even walk in with the drill. You can do some pretty unique experimenting and right in the crop change and try things without it costing you a lot and without it being where it's measured down to the 0.5%. I'm probably not that accurate, but it does give you a certain freedom to try things. And yeah, we're in the auto steer, of course, and the combine and the mapping. We're just getting into the world of mapping, more so for the future. I've been across that land enough times and for enough years and this and that it's kind of right in my mind. And most of the land I could, let me give you an example. 2 years ago, we were in a drought and we seeded a lot of acres on the farm because it was dry enough. We were able to break sloughs and this and that. And by the time the canola crop was in 3 to 4, 5 leaf stage, you could see that, well, by golly, it appears like this year we're going to get more production out of the lower lands than we will out of the higher lands. So off we go, but our inputs end up in the areas that you think will be the places that will actually have good crop. So put it where you can get the most back. This past spring, we had some terrible torrential rains and some hail, and the lowlands were flooded out and this and that. But when you're in crop applying, you can already see that. We kind of knew that we're going to get a little more crop off the higher lands than that, and our lower lands are not going to. So even in the summertime, you're constantly making adjustments. Constantly, the weather wins every year.
Right. Weather trumps everything. Now, we talk a lot on the show too about, micronutrient fertility. We talk about regenerative ag, and we talk about biologicals and different things in the soil. Have you been able to find anything that works for you? Are you interested in those things, or is it just good old meat and potatoes and let's not worry about the rest?
Some meat and potatoes, but years ago we did foliar micronutrients and that with a really good product come up out of the United States. Didn't contain salts. You could apply it through the spray rig really easy because there's no cleanups and all that. It was an excellent product. I liked what it did, but the price tag was cost prohibitive then. We're moving back in it today because we have better products at a better price. Our grain prices have went up, and now it can be more cost effective. Plus, the longer we farm this dirt, the more we're going to take out of it. If you've got a quarter section that was broke 100 years ago, and then you got a quarter section that was broke in the 70s, you probably got two different quarters. That, over time, our soils will need more help. I think that's just obvious in it. And sulfurs and potash and others are all well-rounded, just like you and me. We got to eat many different types of food to be healthy. If all we do is eat potatoes, it doesn't work so good. But if we put some vegetables and fish and meat and everything, we grow stronger, smarter, better. And we do it. We're not religious about anything. We're always ready to change and adapt on the go, even, I guess, through the season.
Good for you. Good for you.
You gotta be.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of fish, how is it that you got bought in on a fly-in fish farm? Fishing trip. Fish. I guess I call it fish farm, but it's a fishing camp. Sorry, Michael.
Yeah. Fish camp, northern Saskatchewan. Well, it was quite a number of years ago that some friends of mine, and through, I guess, Lions Club and that, we met up with a blind man, lives in Flin Flon, Saskatchewan. His name is Ted Olson. And in 1999, he renewed his 50-year lease on the camp. This is how you get a lease from the Sask government. So with a new lease, he wanted to build some cabins. Okay, well, we need some guys. So myself and, I don't know, 5, 6, 8, 9 guys and a few boxes of beer, we went up there and helped Ted build these cabins. And with working with Ted and his disability that he really didn't see as a disability, it was unfortunate, but he simply moved on with his life and kept going. And he had an attitude of, we can't fail. We just got to keep trying. So his name, Ted Olson, my dad's name, Ted Muscoby. I have two Teds that have influenced me a lot in my life and character. And if I could say I want to be like him, I want to be like them. But Ted, he wanted you to help him, but he really wanted to do it himself. So if you could just help him a little bit, you stood back and watched him do it. Because he said, although it's more of a challenge, at least I can do it, he would say. So to have that out in the bush, building cabins with a man like that just had this, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. And he did. And catch fish and walk around. You would forget that he was blind. We built an outhouse for him. He says, let me have a look at that. So he goes into the outhouse. He runs his hands all around he's looking with his fingers. He runs his hands all around the outhouse and he says, the bench, that the toilet that you guys put in there? Yeah, we put flush toilets in there, porcelain flush toilets that you pump the water in, and it was on an enclosed hole, and when you were done, you flushed it down into this great big hole that worked like its septic tank and that, so you had flush toilets in the north. But he says, that toilet's out of level. You guys have to level that toilet. And he did that with his hands. But he says, let me have a look at that. My buddy, okay, Ted's up there with a bunch of guys and we're cooking and partying and working and all this. And he says, it's late at night. We've worked. He says, you guys leave the dishes for me. At least I can do the dishes. I want to help, you know. He wants to be a part of the game, if you will. Okay. So as everybody's heading off to bed, my buddy is the last guy going to bed. He said, Ted, would you like me to leave the lights on for you? Not, not thinking, you know, that, because that's just a normal thing, right?
Yeah.
Ted turned to him and said, I actually only put the lights in for you handicapped guys.
Touche. Nice.
When you got a guy like that, how can you lose?
Yeah.
He never saw the negative.
That's amazing. Two Teds that taught you so much. So that's a great story. Now, what are you most excited about for farming? You talked about succession. We're going to wrap things up here soon. We could talk all day and there's lots more I'd like to ask you, but what are you most excited about for the next generation coming in, Micheal? It's a huge honor that you get to work with them. What are you excited about for them?
Well, knowing that, in my experience, we have always managed to overcome and improve. And we have made some tremendous improvements, and we will continue. When I talk to you about summer following in the 80s and dirt drifting, I'm very excited that they don't have to see that. They don't have to go through that. And those type of advancements will be magnified in the future, right? We have more knowledge. We have more, even the internet and what we're doing today, and the ability to share knowledge and learn is probably our greatest asset. And if I can instill that in those coming, adapt to change, grow as a person, grow as a crop, grow as your vision, your surroundings. I actually see it getting a heck of a lot better, right? We progress in this world. We always have. Long ways from Grandma and Grandpa.
Yeah.
Long ways. And that's only 120 years. My son-in-law is an immigrant from England. They've been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but they have progressed. Things are way better. Not perfect. We have our own challenges. We have our own issues today, but we've got it pretty good. I guess that's the way. And when I was in school, there was 3 billion people. Today, there's 8 billion people. There's a tremendous growth as well. And we're managing to feed them, and we're managing to keep them, and not perfectly, absolutely. There's always room for improvement, and therein lies the challenge. And we need to challenge ourselves constantly. Constantly, it is a challenge yourself to see if you can accomplish. I also, Dan, at one time, I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane and went skydiving and parachuting. Learned how to do that. Took a course, got a card, said I was certified. Jumped out of an airplane by myself. You know, challenge yourself. Without challenge, we're not worth that much. We kind of wither and deteriorate a little bit. So if I could instill that in them, that would be good.
Micheal, you are a great communicator. You're a great man of character. I really appreciate what you do. You're just a classic Saskatchewan farmer in my mind, full of integrity and, you know, bent on hard work.
Thank you.
Driven to make things better and get better a little bit every year. And I think part of the reason Saskatchewan's doing so well is because of the kind of values that you have, people like you have that have been fortunate enough to till the land and and make the land better and grow food for the world. And I come from that heritage. You know, we just win the lottery where we're born, man. Like we could have been born,
Yeah.
we could have been born in the Donbass. We're not that far removed from it. You know, my
Yes.
grandfather was born on the banks of the Volga River region. You know, he
Right.
got out before the Bolsheviks got him by the nape of the neck. Thank the
Yeah.
Lord.
Well,
But
that was the reason my family immigrated. It was because of the history of wars in
yeah,
that part of the world. Will's family immigrated from England because he said there are too many people in England. And therein is a coming or is here today is straight population growth. That your opportunities were better here to actually own farmland. In England, where his dad farmed, it is all owned by lords and such, and you simply rent from them. So the opportunity to actually own it. But then Will said he had an uncle, or a grandfather, pardon me, who actually owned 200 acres of land in England. And it was like, oh my God, you own land.
yeah.
We haven't gotten there yet, or we don't have that yet, you know. That so yeah, we will move around and go where we have to go, but we're lucky we get sunrises and sunsets here every day. And every morning I can, if I can be out there at sunrise, and if I can be out there at sunset and somehow through the day, yeah, that's a good life, Dan. I'll take that.
It's a good life, my friend. Thank
Yeah.
you for coming on the show. I mean, we could talk forever. There's a lot of things I want to ask you about, but I try and keep these to an hour for the sake of the audience. I'm sure they made it to the end though, because I think for anybody involved in agriculture, you know, folks like yourself are a gem. You have a lot of wisdom for the younger generations, and like I say, the reason that Saskatchewan's done so well, that farming continues to be such a good industry, that so many people have so much rich and nutrient dense food when they go to a grocery store. Go to a grocery store. It's a modern marvel. I mean, you can take
Yes.
anything home with you. And we don't we don't grow sushi here, and we don't grow
Mm-hmm.
bananas here, but wheat and canola and the fundamental commodities are the engine, just like oil and gas, that drives modern civilization. It put the Haber-Bosch process into the ground, and you get these crops that run food and fuel, and now you guys hopefully can farm carbon. It's a good deal. But thank you for coming on the show and sharing your stories and your wisdom with us. If people wanted to reach out to you after hearing your story, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, Micheal, and say hi and visit on anything, how would you tell them to get a hold of you?
Text or call me on my cell. It's probably the best. 306
Yeah.
736 7800. And I
Wow.
never turn my phone off. You know, you're a farmer. Your phone's never turned off. It's just the way
Exactly.
it is. You charge it, but you don't turn it off. So also have an email, which is
Yep.
our last name, or muscobym@gmail.com as
Awesome.
well. So yeah,
Thank you so
you
much,
get a
my
hold of
friend.
me
It's been
personally
awesome.
anytime. Yeah. And
Yeah. No,
they can let me know if they want to do a little work. They come out and do a little work any day,
looking for help.
anytime. I'm
Well, you
not
made the
running
farm.
out of work here. Yep.
Well, you don't have to haul the bales by hand anymore, so this is good.
I hear.
You get everything's
Yep.
mechanized. You got auto steer, you got
Yep.
air conditioning, you got the cab. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you can listen to
Yep.
podcasts in the cab. It's a good life now.
Yes, it is. And thank you for what you're doing here. It's only through the free exchange of knowledge. And as I say, if somebody can pick up one good idea from listening here today, then maybe I've achieved something.
Well, you
One good
shared a
idea.
lot of wisdom. You shared a lot of wisdom, and it's my privilege to be able to do so. I'm very honored to be able to do so, and thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.